everyone, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today a new design with our DiscDuo beads, which the DiscDuo beads are our bead that is 6 millimeters, and it is a flat disc shape, and then it has 2 holes in it. It's known as the DiscDuo, and I'm going to be working with that and kind of highlighting the DiscDuo today. In addition to the DiscDuo, we're going to be using some seed beads for this slip and slide. Kind of looks like it goes right along a kind of slippery slope, and that's why I'm calling it the slip and slide. Also sounds like a fun name. For this bracelet, I am going to be using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread, and I'm using it in the black color since my beads are black. If you need any of these materials, you can look on this left-hand side here to the link for those materials, or in the drop-down underneath the description for the video. It'll give you a list that you can take to your local Potomac Bead Company store, or you can shop online with us. In addition to the DiscDuos, which I'm going to be using the Jet Picasso color in my DiscDuos, I'm also going to be using an 11-0, 2 15s, and a drop. I'm going to change out the end here to a drop just to change that little slip and slide a little bit. For my 15-0s, I'm going to be using the turquoise green color. I'm also using 2 of the same colors from my 15 and my 11. I'm using the Crystal Labrador Fool in 15, and then I'm also using that Crystal Labrador Fool, or I'm sorry, the Crystal Aluminum Silver, almost the same color, just a tiny bit darker in my 11-0. I am going to pop a drop out on the side of this slip and slide bracelet, and I'm going to be using the Miyuki drop in the Picasso Smoky Black, which looks very much like a Jet Picasso bead. When I'm working with it, it'll kind of highlight the sides. In addition to that 0.006 black Wildfire thread, I'm also using a size 11, and this is a size 11 tulip needle that I'm going to have on the end of my 5 feet of my black thread. To close it all up, I have a cup button here, and this is the turquoise Picasso cup button. You could also use a jade cup button. That color goes really nicely with Miyuki's color of the turquoise green. To get started, it's going to be very simple. We're going up, back, and kind of snaking around, just like it's called the slip and slide. So we're going to go straight up the project, just like a slip and slide would be, straight down the project, and then we get to do kind of those zigzag motions. I am working on a bead mat here, and I have a pliers handy in case I need to squash down the end of my thread. Near me also, I have the slip and snip pliers. I have my Wildfire cord cutter or thread burner. And handy, I always have my super new glue because I do glue the ends of my thread. To get started, we're just going to be working with our DiscDuos as well as our 11-0 seed beads. So you want to make little piles of those to start. And once we have those little piles going, you also want to pick up a bead on your bead mat that could be a stop bead. Stop bead is going to be one bead that is not included in your project in order to stop your beads from falling off, because we're going to be adding the clasp not right at the beginning. On the end of my 5 feet of thread, I've added a stop bead. A stop bead, again, is a bead that's not included in my project. Generally, I use a red or white bead so that way I know for sure it comes off. And this one here is just a galvanized champagne that I happen to have on my bead mat. It goes on the thread, and then you take your needle back through the bead 2 times away from the little tail that exposes the thread on the outside of the project. And we'll take this off at the very end. For this project, because we are going up the project and then coming back the project, we're not going to worry about having a long tail at the end of our beading thread. So I just have about 2 inches. That's enough that I can grab onto and tie some thread off as I come up and down the project. When you look at the design of the slip and slide, it's really quite simple to start. We're going to be using our DiscDuos and then an 11-0, DiscDuo 11-0, and straight up the project. So to get started, I'm going to pick up one of my 11-0s, DiscDuo, 11-0s, DiscDuo. I'm not worrying about which hole of the DiscDuo it's going into. The only time that I would need to keep track of that is if I had a color like Capri Gold or Slipperit that actually has 2 sides to it. One that's a little bit more transparent and then one that has a coating on it. That's when, if you do want them to be all the same direction, like you can see the middle 3 here, that's when you would want to make sure that you're always picking up, say, the right side of that hole. But because I'm using a color that doesn't have sides to it, I don't have to worry about it, which kind of takes a step away from the project, which is nice because then you can move quicker. All you're going to do is add the disc duos with the 11 O's in between for the whole length of your project. I usually wear my bracelets at about 6.5 inches. I have about a 6-inch wrist, and I like them to hang a little bit. So I'm going to do this about 6 inches because my cup button usually adds about 1/2 inch by the time I add it and add my loop in order to add it all to close it off. So I'm going to add my disc duos the whole length of my project, so about 6 inches worth of disc duos, just in that same pattern, adding the 11 O's in between each disc duo. So I'm at the end here of those 6 inches, and I finished with an 11 O. So I started my pattern with an 11 O, and I ended with an 11 O. To get to the other side of the project, what I'm going to do is actually add my clasp. So I'm going to grab my button, add that now, and then I'm going to come down the other side. To add the button, I want to pick up two more of my 11 O's. That'll give the button a little bit of room to move. Go up through the back of the button, pour out my drops, and just use one of them. When I'm out the top of the button, I'm going to add one of my 11s, a drop, and an 11, and that's just going to decorate that button a little bit. I'm going to come down the other side of the button, and once I'm out the back end here, I'm going to add 3 more of my 11 O seed beads, and then I'm going to come down that same round duo, so that first one, I'm going to come down towards the stop bead and just go right back along the line. So I didn't worry about reinforcing that cup button because as I do my project, again, we're going to be coming up and down the project, so I'll do that after the fact. Now, simply stated, add an 11, go through the empty hole of your next disc duo. Do that the whole way down on this opposite side now. So you can see here it's just an 11 O. Pick up that second hole of the disc duo. It's also just a pretty design by itself that if you want to keep it really simple, want to do some simple quick bracelets, you can do that. So again, disc duo, 11 O, go through the second hole, 11 O, constantly down to the end of the project. So I'm down to the end of my round duos, disc duos, and I'm going to get ready to create my loop for my cup button to sit in. I'm coming out one of my disc duos here at the end, and I'm going to add a bunch of my 11s, about 25 of them. And once I have those on my needle, we're going to start down the other side. I am going to tie off my stop bead the next time down, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm going to worry about the next go round. Couple more beads on here. Now we're going to get ready to go down, like I said, the other side here. When I go down the other side, I am going to, if you're looking at the back here, I'm going to use my base color, which is my 11 O's here. And then I'm also going to be using my teardrops in place of that middle bead. So we're going to get ready to do that down and zigzag down across the 2 rows as we're working with them. So what I'm going to be doing is laying out more of my 11 O's and getting out some more of my drops. So I poured out some more of my beads, and I'm going to come down the other side here, going through the 11, the disc duo, and the 11 on the opposite side. This is going to pull my loop closed. And when I'm coming out the 11, on every other disc duo, that's how I'm going to get that kind of zigzagging effect, I'm going to add a simple pattern of 2 11s, 1 drop, 2 11s. I'm going to then sew through the 11-0, the DiscDuo, and the 11-0 that are next. So that's going to pop that design out right there on the side. Again, 2 11s, a drop, 2 11s, sew through the next 11, DiscDuo 11. So basically you're decorating the side of every other DiscDuo. And that's going to get that point going. So I'm going to do the same thing going the whole way down now, adding those 2, 1, 2 pattern, and then sewing straight through past one to the next. Continue doing that the whole way down this one side. I've gone quickly down the right side here, adding in my beads. When I get to the end, I'm going to use this time to reinforce my cup button. So I'm going up the cup button. At the same time, try to grab onto that 11-0. Go through the drop and down the other side through the 11-0 and down all the seed beads. When I'm coming out the other side here, you want to take note that we're going to be starting going on the opposite side. So our groups of 2, then 1, then 2 are going to start to appear going in a zigzag fashion when you're looking at the project. So I'll put this first one in here. And you can see now it's on the opposite side. So we've started that trend now on the opposite side, and you're going to continue that the whole way down, adding in that pattern of that 2, 1, 2. The Miyuki drops are pretty good, but because of their shape, they tend to be a little bit more inconsistent than a lot of the other Miyuki shapes. If you find a drop that has a really thick base or a really thin base, I usually just kind of take those off to the side so that way they don't break off. But I'm going to continue getting that first zigzagging motion as I build the project along. I'm at the end, coming down this one side here, and I've added my beads right at the end, and I'm going to go through my clasp here. So I'm going through the loop of the clasp and reinforcing that clasp. When I get down to my stop bead, and this is the point where I'm actually going to get rid of that stop bead and sew my threads together by creating a knot. So I have my thread right down next to my stop bead. I'm going to take that stop bead off. A lot of times you can just kind of pull and put some tension on that. Sometimes you will have to put a needle on the end and kind of back it through the threads. And all I'm going to do right now is tie those 2 threads together. So the one my needle is still attached to, the other is just the short end. I'm going to pull nice and tightly and create that knot. I have that twice, and I'm just going to leave that thread end on there. Now what we get to do is add our second layer of beads. The second layer of beads is going to be our secondary color, which in my case here is going to be my silver. I'm going to snake along the project with my blue beads. So I'm going to get out my 15 O's in my silver color, and we are going to be using those down the project, kind of mirroring what I just did here with the 11 O's. Here at the end then, after my knot, I'm going to sew through my other 11 O, sew through my DiscDuo, and I'm going to sew through the 11 O on the other side and come out. Once I'm out that bead, here on the bottom you can see I'm going to add 3 of my 15 O's. Then I'm going to go through my drop and add 3 more 15 O's. So 3 of the silver 15s get added. I'm going to sew through my drop and just the drop. That's going to lay those 15 O's right on top, and you do want them to stay to the top. 3 more go on. and then I'm going to pick up that first 11-0, go through the DiscDuo, and come out that first 11-0. Again, wanting to make sure that those 3 beads in that silver color sit right on the top of the other 3 silver. When I'm coming out the 11, after the DiscDuo, I add 3 more 15s. So through the drop, add 3 more 15s. So through the last 11, the DiscDuo, and the first 11 after the next one. Keep that all to the top and move on to the next one. You can see it almost builds it up on the edge here and just adds a little bit more height to the project and a little bit more of a fancy finished look. Continuing down one side, then I'm going to come down the other side, doing the same thing, adding those silver 15-0s into place. I'm right at the end of one of those rows, adding my 3 15s, and I'm going to reinforce my cut button at this time. And we already did this once. I'm going to do it once more. It's getting a little tight going through there, especially with this a little bit thicker needle on. If you want to, you can switch to a 12, but not necessary. Sometimes you just have to pull and push a tiny little bit. Once I get through that button one more time, I am coming down this side here, adding in my 15s just like I did down the previous side. Again, that sets it up nice and bezeled versus the other side. Down one more side, and then we get to add in some color. I'm right at the end of this second row, and I'm going to go through my seed beads here. But at the same time, I'm going to actually reinforce my loop by adding a little bit of color in those 15-0s in that turquoise green color. To do that, I'm going to pick up one, and this is a peyote stitch, 1 bead of my 15-0s, skip one of my silvers, and go through the next 11-0. When I'm coming out there, I'm going to add 2 of my 15-0s, skip 1, and go through my next 11. And I'm going to continue that peyote pattern of 2, 1, 2. And that's going to decorate up that end. The reason that I'm using 2 in place of just 1 is because the 15s are smaller than the 11s, obviously. But also because I'm doing it on the clasp section, I want it to be rounded. And so naturally, we're going to need to fill in some space because the outer edge is going to be smaller than the inner edge, or bigger than the inner edge, I'm sorry. So I'm going to continue going around, adding in 1 and then 2, 1, 2 of those 15-0s right along the edge of my loop. So I've finished with that peyote stitch right along the end. If you don't like the look of the peyote stitch, you don't know peyote stitch, or you don't want to have those blue on the outside, what you can actually do is just go right back through the loop and that'll reinforce it. I do want to come out before the last 11-0, so I'm here right before the last 11-0 before the DiscDuo, and I have my thread and needle coming out right there because I'm going to start kind of that zigzag pattern right there in with my clasp. To do that, I'm going to add 3 of my 15-0s in my turquoisey color. That's going to kind of create a bridge from one side to the other. Every time now what I'm going to do is add 3 15-0s. So at the start this is going to add 6. I'm going to do a ladder stitch where I go back through my 15-0s in the silver color towards the clasp. I'm going to sew back through the last 3 in the turquoise, that turquoise green color that I added. And that's going to pull those beads right next to and on top of those exterior 3 silver 15s. On the other side, I'm going to pick up 3 more of my 15s. So back through the 3 silvers. So back through the 3 15s. So I'm circling around Again, if you know ladder stitch, it's just that ladder stitch, or square stitch for that matter. When I get to the middle here, I'm going to add 2 beads, and that's going to kind of join one side for the other and get that little bit of that slip and sliding, that zigzagging motion. So I'm going to add 2 of my 15-0s, and then I'm going to add my 3. Those 3 are going to sit right on top of the silver 15s that I'm sewing back through towards my loop end. And then I'm going to sew through the last 3 15s in the turquoise. Pull them right into place there. Add 3 more of the turquoise. Sew back through the 15s towards the loop end. Bring my thread around then through those 15s that I just added towards my button. Make sure you go through all of them. I usually don't like to sew away from, or towards me. Sometimes I have to for the video. Once you're back through all 3 of those, give a tug, add 2 more beads to go in between that link area, and then your set of 3. Sew back through the 15s towards the loop end, back through those 3 15s towards the button end. Pull the thread in tight. You can see that zigzaggy wave starting to happen. 3 more 15s go on. Back through the 15s on the previous row. And this will be the second strand of thread that is through those 15s. See, they kind of want to lay on an angle. Go back through them. You're going to add your 2 for the middle, and then your 3 for the next group of 3. So back through the next group of 3 of the silvers towards that loop end, back through the 3 towards the button end. You're just going to continue doing that, adding the 3 and then the 2 joiner and the 3, and every time you are near one of those silver 15-0s groupings of 3, that's when you're going to do that square stitch, going back through the beads here. I'm just going to continue down, adding on my fun 11-0s and getting that wavy, zigzaggy slip and slide motion. The reason this one is more rounded and this one has a little bit more peak is just the addition of the drops. If you like them more rounded, stick to an 11-0 here at the base, and that's going to keep and maintain that little area. So I'm right here at the end, and I just have my last 3 15s to put in place. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other side, where I continued that zigzag over. I'm going back through those 3. When I'm coming out of that last 15 seed bead, I'm going to add 3 more. And then I'm going to come down the DiscDuo on the other side. So flipping over my pattern, sometimes it's easier to get into it that way, down through that DiscDuo on that side. Once I'm out the DiscDuo on the other side, I'm going to tie off this thread here just by doing some half-hitch knots, going underneath some of my beading and picking up some of the bridge threads or warp threads, making loops and creating those half hitch knots or sewer's knots. You can do this in a couple different places. Go back through the project, right along the line. It gets tight sometimes in the project doing this because you've got a lot of strands going through there. You sometimes, like you can see me wiggling that needle. If you want to, you can switch off to a size 12 needle. I'm going to do another one of those half hitch knots there. And once I have the knots completed and done, all I'm going to do is glue my project. So back through a tiny bit here. I'm going to pick up my super new glue here and glue right where I did those stitches on the back side. And when you turn over the front and look at it, you have that nice completed zigzag then going from one end to the other. The reason, again, we got the zigzag versus the little kind of swirl for our slip and slide bracelet is because we did use a bigger bead here, which created more of a V. If you do want more of that swirl, you'll want to just change out and instead of the drop, use the 11-0. Other than that, all of the spacing, the counting, and everything is the same. So if you want more of kind of that snake version, just eliminate the drop on the end. Stick with another 11-0 for your first row. I like that you can kind of make two different bracelets that look almost identical with that here. I actually wish I would have used the turquoise drop colors to kind of accentuate. If you do want more of that zigzag, you can also take your thread end rather than tying it off here and go back through all of your 15-0s right along the top and sew and finish right at the end. Once that glue is dried and I've dried on any, and I've tied off any ends, I'm just going to burn those down with my thread burner and have my completed bracelet. After all those ends are finished off, you have your fun bracelet for that slip and slide working with the DiscDuos and then those two seed bead sizes. It fits nicely on the wrist. You could actually do this in multiple rows, kind of connecting at that zigzag spot. You can do, again, different beads on the sides, which is going to create a different shape of that zigzag and kind of play around. If you wanted to do some round duos, if you don't have any disc duos or some honeycomb beads, you can play around with those also. So have fun making this slip and slide bracelet. Again, if you need any of the materials, you can go back to the beginning of this video, or you can look in the details right underneath the video. If you like this project and want to see others as well as updates on new products that we have in, new designs that we're doing, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and you'll get regular updates on those. You can also check us out on Facebook, and if you need materials, you can also go to your local Potomac Bead Company store. Again, check out PotomacBeads.com to get information to shop online or where the stores are located. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and happy beading!